The northwest freeze does not arrive with a sudden dramatic roar. It creeps over the shores of Puget Sound like a slow, damp sigh, settling into the mossy joints of the hemlocks and the bricks of the old Seattle craftsman houses until everything you touch feels slightly wet and heavy. I was 48 years old, spent, and sitting at my kitchen island with a cup of black coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago, listening to the relentless patter of winter rain against the skylight. My name is Garrick Mercer. I work as a senior construction supervisor for a historic preservation firm, rebuilding the old wooden trestle bridges and retrofitting the scenery of the historic structures that keep this city from sliding into the saltwater. It is hard, wet, unforgiving work that leaves your fingers permanently calloused, your knees clicking like dry twigs, and your lungs smelling of damp cedar and mortar dust. I made $94,000 last year. Good money, honest money, the kind of money that should allow a man to sleep soundly at night, knowing his family is safe and his debts are paid. Or so I had believed. For 24 years of marriage, I operated under the quiet, simple assumption that love is not a speech you deliver under spotlight beams. It is the work you do when everyone else is fast asleep or lost in the blue glow of their smartphone screens. It was the 4 consecutive Saturdays I spent crawling beneath Chloe's old Jeep in a gravel driveway, changing her rusted brake pads in a freezing drizzle because a local dealership had quoted her $600, and she'd looked at me with those wide, helpless eyes of hers. It was the months of labor I spent after my 10-hour shifts building the magnificent custom-milled cedar greenhouse in our backyard, carefully sanding every single joint and installing double-glazed glass panes so she could cultivate her organic heirloom botany projects for her university classes. Nobody asked me to do it. Nobody ordered me to spend my evenings with a headlamp strapped to my brow, shivering in the damp garden while the rain dripped off the brim of my hat. I did it because she was my daughter, and because a father's hands are meant to build the walls that protect his children from the cold. When I slid my phone across the granite countertop, on a rainy Tuesday evening in late September, showing Evelyn the booking confirmation for a private beachfront villa in St. Barthélemy, I thought I was giving them something they would remember for the rest of their lives. A full week in St. Barts, a private pool overlooking the turquoise Caribbean waters, flights fully paid. It cost me $7,000. $7,000 of hard-earned overtime, of gas station sandwiches eaten in the cab of my truck during 15-minute lunch breaks, of pushing my aching joints past their limits on a bridge restoration project near Tacoma. Evelyn, I had said, watching her eyes go genuinely wide for once, stripping away that polite, vacant curator smile she usually reserved for her wealthy interior design clients. St. Bart's, the whole week. It's completely taken care of, Garrick, you didn't. She had whispered, her fingers tracing the screen of my phone as if she were touching a rare, precious manuscript. The beachfront villa near Gustavia? How did you manage this? Don't worry about the cost, I had replied, offering her a tired, reassuring smile. Those were 5 words I would replay in my head for the rest of my life, like a broken needle scraping across the groove of a ruined vinyl record. Chloe had come thundering down the stairs a moment later, her hair damp from the Seattle rain, her AirPods firmly in her ears. When Evelyn told her where we were going, Chloe had actually screamed, a sharp, high sound of pure, unadulterated delight. She had thrown her arms around my neck, hugging me for exactly 4 seconds, her perfume smelling of expensive vanilla and lavender. Dad, you are literally the best father in the entire state of Washington, she had squealed, her thumbs already flying across her screen at a lightning pace. Oh my God, I'm telling everyone. I'm posting this right now. Maybe wait until the boarding passes are in our hands before you tell the whole world, I had laughed, reaching out to pat her shoulder, but she hadn't heard me. She was already lost in her screen, drafting a caption, adjusting a filter, composing a performance of gratitude for people she had never met. I want you to remember that moment. The high-pitched scream, the brief, vanilla-scented hug, the frantic clicking of her thumbs, because it was the absolute last time in this story that either my wife or my daughter looked at me like I was a human being who mattered, rather than a utility bill they had successfully managed to exploit. To pay for that trip, I had worked 60-hour weeks for 3 straight months. I had taken every single night shift the firm offered, standing on cold concrete bridge decks over the Puyallup River, while the wet river wind bit through my thermals, watching the city sleep in the distance. By the time the departure date was 48 hours away, I was running on pure adrenaline and cheap energy drinks, but I didn't care. I kept a quiet countdown timer on my computer screen at work. 4 days to St. Barts, 3 days to St. Barts, 2 days then. On a cold Thursday evening while I was in the garage organizing our heavy hard-shell suitcases, the sky finally fell. It hit me without warning. A sharp, white-hot pain low in my right side, so agonizingly intense that it felt like someone had driven a rusted iron railroad spike deep into my hip and twisted it with a pair of pliers. I tried to gasp, but the air caught in my throat. The garage went completely dark at the edges, the concrete floor rushing up to meet my face. I dropped to one knee, then both knees, my forehead pressing against the cold, grease-stained concrete as a thick, cold sweat broke out across my back. Evelyn. I tried to call out, but my voice came out as a thin, pathetic rattle, drowned out entirely by the steady, heavy rumble of the rain against the metal garage door. She found me nearly 15 minutes later. She was standing over me with a basket of folded white laundry, balanced on her hip, her face neutral, looking down at me as if I were some strange, untidy pile of clothes she had forgotten to clear from the hallway. "Garrick?" she had said, her voice carrying a thin, clipped edge of annoyance rather than concern. "What are you doing on the floor? The bags aren't even zipped yet, and we have to leave for SeaTac in the morning. Hospital." I had managed to choke out, my fingers clawing at the concrete. Something ruptured. It was a ruptured appendix. By midnight, I was under the harsh humming lights of Seattle Grace, the surgeons working quickly to clean out the toxic fluid that had spilled into my abdominal cavity. They patched the hole in my belly, filled me with heavy intravenous antibiotics, and discharged me 36 hours later, because that is how modern insurance works. They stitch you up, run your card, and shove you out into the damp parking lot before you can even stand up straight or clear the anesthesia from your eyes. I had a 6-inch incision held together with nothing but medical glue and paper tape, a plastic bottle of heavy narcotic painkillers, and strict printed discharge orders. No lifting. Minimal movement. Patient must have a designated caregiver present for at least 7 days to monitor for fever or internal infection. Evelyn drove me back to our Craftsman home in Redmond in near-perfect silence. The windshield wipers made a rhythmic, squeaking sound against the glass, swipe, pause, and I remember thinking to myself, she's just terrified, she's processing the shock. "Give her a minute, Garrick, she loves you." I gave her a minute, then I gave her a day. By the afternoon of the second day, as I lay propped up on 3 flat pillows in our master bedroom, the pain in my side throbbing like a dull, heavy hammer, I realized that the silence in our house wasn't the silence of fear. It was the cold, silent calculation of mathematics. I heard her voice in the hallway outside our bedroom door. She was speaking in that low, clipped, businesslike tone she always used when she was negotiating with a difficult fabric supplier or a contractor who had ruined a shipment of Belgian linen. "I know, Sloan, I know," she was saying, her voice tight with a suppressed, simmering anger. "But the $7,000 is completely non-refundable. The villa company in Gustavia was absolute ice about it. If we stay home, we are literally flushing that money down the drain. And the doctor said he just needs quiet. He's supposed to be asleep on the painkillers anyway. If we're here, we'll just be in his way, honestly." I lay there, the plastic water bottle trembling in my calloused hand, and I realized that my wife of 24 years was discussing my life-threatening surgical recovery as if it were a minor, inconvenient scheduling conflict that was threatening to ruin her weekend. The third night after my surgery, Evelyn walked into our bedroom. She was dressed, not in her loungewear, but in her travel outfit, her hair perfectly styled, her silver jewelry catching the dim light of the bedside lamp. Behind her, by the door, sat her large, monogrammed suitcase. "Garrick, honey," she said, her voice dripping with a rehearsed, clinical sweetness that made my stomach turn. She sat on the very edge of the mattress, not leaning in to touch my forehead, keeping her hands folded neatly in her lap. We need to talk about the trip. I spoke with the medical team, and they said your recovery is going to be incredibly slow. You need absolute quiet. No noise, no distractions. I stared at her, my mouth dry from the meds. You're going. It's $7,000, Garrick, she said, her voice hardening just a fraction, the sweetness evaporating like steam. If Chloe and I stay here, we're just losing the money. And Chloe has been looking forward to this for 6 months. You wouldn't want to be the reason she spent her entire quarter break sitting in a dark, raining house, would you? There it was, the pivot. She made it about our daughter's happiness, turning my physical inability to walk into a personal choice to ruin Chloe's youth. If I protested, I was the selfish villain. If I stayed silent, I was abandoned. Evelyn, I can't even stand up, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The doctor said I need someone here to check the incision. What if I get a fever? What if the glue splits? Oh, you'll be perfectly fine, she said, standing up and smoothing her linen trousers. It's only a week. We'll FaceTime you every single morning from the beach. I left a sleeve of saltine crackers and 3 bottles of mineral water on your nightstand. If you get hungry, you can just DoorDash some soup from that place down the street. It's incredibly simple. And then, right there at the foot of my bed, she pulled out her phone and called Sloane. Sloane, darling, she said, her voice instantly transforming into a bright socialite chirp. Yes, so Garrick obviously can't make it. It's just the most dreadful timing, a total nightmare. But listen, the master suite in the Gustavia Villa has that beautiful private terrace. You and Harper absolutely must take it. Don't let it go to waste. She hung up, looked down at me with a quick, superficial smile, and grabbed her suitcase handle. Love you, feel better, she said. A moment later, I heard the heavy rumble of the garage door going up. Then it went down, and then the house settled into a silence I had never heard in 48 years of living. Not the peaceful, quiet silence of a resting home, but the hollow, terrifying silence of absolute abandonment. Welcome to Dad's Hidden Revenge. Get comfortable. This story is going to take you somewhere. Hit that like button and drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Grief has a very specific smell. I learned during those first 36 hours of absolute solitude. It smells of stale saltine crackers, cold tap water, and the damp, slightly metallic scent of old radiator pipes heating a house that nobody is living in. I lay in that queen-size bed, watching the gray Seattle rain paint long streaks down the window panes, listening to the creaking of the cedar rafters above me. Time became a blurred, slippery thing. I drifted in and out of a heavy, narcotic sleep, my dreams filled with the sound of rushing water and the cold gray concrete of the Tacoma Bridge deck. Every time I woke up, the throb in my side was worse, a sharp, burning heat that made me feel like my skin was pulling apart under the bandages. I would reach out to the nightstand, my fingers searching for the water bottle, drinking small, warm sips that did nothing to clear the taste of copper and dry paper from my tongue. By Sunday evening, the crackers were gone, and the last of the 3 water bottles was empty. I lay there in the gathering dark, staring at the ceiling fan spinning its slow, useless circles, realizing with a cold, terrifying clarity that I couldn't make it to the kitchen on my own. My legs felt like hollow paper tubes, and every time I tried to shift my weight to the side, a white-hot spike of agony shot through my abdomen, leaving me gasping and shaking on the damp sheets. And then, I heard the front door click open. My heart instantly leaped into my throat, a sudden, frantic panic thrumming in my chest. Redmond was a safe neighborhood, but an empty house is an invitation, and I was entirely defenseless. I held my breath, listening to the heavy, wet thud of boots in the entryway. "Uncle Garrick?" a voice called out, echoing through the quiet house. "Hey, it's just me. Don't shoot me or anything." It was Julian. Julian Mercer was my sister's son. He was 23 years old, a quiet, slightly awkward kid with unruly brown hair and a permanent smudge of flour on his forearms. He worked the graveyard shift as an apprentice baker at an artisan bakery in Pike Place Market, earning minimum wage while trying to save every single dime to buy his own mobile wood-fired baking truck. My wife Evelyn had called him a dropout couch surfer more than once at our family Thanksgiving dinners, usually right to his face, before laughing that sharp, high-pitched laugh that wasn't really a laugh at all. Julian appeared in my bedroom doorway, wearing his faded gray work hoodie, his car keys still clutched in his flour-dusted hand. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes scanning the room, taking in the empty water bottles, the crumpled sleeve of saltines, the sweat-stained sheets, and the hollow gray look of my face. "My mom told me what happened," Julian said quietly, his voice low and steady. "She said you had emergency surgery on Thursday. I figured Aunt Evelyn or Chloe would be here. Where are they?" "They went to St. Bart's, Julian," I said, and even to my own ears my voice sounded like a stranger's, flat, dead, and entirely devoid of life. The trip was non-refundable. They didn't want to waste the $7,000. Julian didn't say a word. He didn't curse. He didn't shake his head. And he didn't ask how a mother and daughter could leave a man with a hole in his stomach alone with a sleeve of crackers. He just set his car keys down on my oak dresser, walked over to the bed, and looked down at me. "When was the last time you ate something that wasn't a cracker, Uncle Garrick?" he asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted, my eyes burning with a sudden, humiliating heat. "Friday morning, I think." "At the hospital. All right," Julian said, already rolling up the sleeves of his gray hoodie. "Give me 20 minutes. I'm going to make you some bone broth, and then we're going to get you cleaned up." I lay there in the dim bedroom, listening to the distant, comforting sounds of my own kitchen coming back to life. The cupboard doors opening, a heavy metal pot hitting the stove, the low, steady hum of Julian, talking to himself the way bakers do when they're working with dough. "Nobody should have left you like this, Garrick. It's messed up." Those were the words he had whispered before he walked down the hall. And as I lay there, smelling the rich, savory scent of chicken broth slowly drifting into the bedroom, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was an Instagram notification. A new photo posted by Evelyn. There they were. Evelyn, Chloe, Sloane, and Harper. All four of them were standing on a pristine, white sand beach under a blazing Caribbean sun, their faces glowing with a golden sunset tan, holding crystal glasses filled with pale pink champagne. Behind them, the turquoise water looked like a painted backdrop. The caption read, "Finally away from the gray Seattle rain. Exhaling at last. Self-care sparks gratitude." I set the phone face down on the wood. I didn't write back. I didn't send a text asking how the flight was. I just closed my eyes, the warmth of Julian's chicken broth finally reaching my stomach. And for the first time in 4 days, I let myself breathe. "Exhale, Evelyn," I whispered into the empty room. "Enjoy every single sip of that champagne." By Tuesday, 5 days after my surgery, I was able to stand up and take short, halting steps on my own, keeping one hand pressed firmly against my right side, as if I could physically hold my skin together. Julian had gone back to his apartment to shower and sleep for a few hours, but he had promised to return by 5 o'clock with groceries. I was sitting at the kitchen island, staring out the window at the custom-built cedar greenhouse in the backyard. The rain had cleared for a brief, rare hour, and the afternoon sun was catching the glass panes I had spent so many cold nights sanding and leveling. I pulled out my phone, a sudden pathetic urge rising in my chest to connect with my daughter. I typed out a long, careful message to Chloe. "Feeling a bit better today, kiddo. Standing up on my own now. Julian's been staying here helping me with everything. I was just looking at the greenhouse outside. Thought about how much fun we had selecting the cedar. Hope you're having an amazing time in St. Bart's. Love you, Dad." I hit send. I sat there, watching the 2 gray check marks turn blue nothing. No reply. An hour passed. 2 hours. By 9 o'clock that evening, my phone remained completely silent. "She's just busy, Garrick," I told myself, the old, familiar excuses rising to my throat like bile. "She's 19. She's on a beach with her friends. She'll text you before she goes to bed." But she didn't text me. Instead, Julian, who was sitting on the living room sofa reading a baking manual, looked up and glanced at his phone. "Uncle Garrick," he said, his voice hesitant, a strange, uncomfortable look crossing his face. Do you follow Chloe on TikTok?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I don't really understand that stuff." "Why?" Julian hesitated for a long second, then stood up and walked over to the kitchen island, holding out his phone. "She just posted this 20 minutes ago. I follow her because my mom wanted me to keep an eye on her college stuff." I took the phone. On the screen, Chloe was standing in a bright, tropical bedroom in the St. Bart's villa, wearing a designer bikini, doing some kind of lip-sync dance with Sloane's daughter. They were laughing, throwing their hair back, the ocean breeze catching the sheer white curtains behind them. But it was the text overlay on the video that made my blood run entirely cold. When your dad texts you a whole novel about a wooden greenhouse while you're literally trying to enjoy a yacht in St. Bart's, lol, dramatic dads be like he's main character energy. The video had 41,000 views. The comment section was filled with laughing emojis, people joking about damp boomer energy, and guilt-tripping parents. I handed the phone back to Julian. "Uncle Garrick, I'm sorry," he whispered, looking as if he wished he had never shown me. That's really rotten of her." "It's fine, Julian," I said, my voice completely flat, devoid of any anger or pain. It was the same word Evelyn had used when she left me. Fine. It is a useful, load-bearing word, a word you use to hold up the ceiling when the walls have already collapsed around you. I went back to our master bedroom, sat on the edge of the mattress, and deleted the draft of the second, longer text message I had started writing to my daughter. The one where I'd planned to tell her how terrified I had been on that cold garage floor, how I had genuinely believed I was having a heart attack, and that the last thing I would ever hear was the sound of the rain. I deleted it, character by character, until the screen was blank. You spend 19 years of your life teaching a child how to ride a bike, how to drive a car, how to stand on her own 2 feet in a world that doesn't care about her. You spend your nights building her greenhouses out of raw cedar, and somewhere along the way she learns how to turn your pain into 41,000 views. "Okay," I whispered to myself, staring at the blank screen of my phone. "Okay." The certified yellow envelope arrived on Wednesday morning at precisely 11 o'clock. The rain had returned to Redmond, a heavy gray downpour that made the pine trees in the backyard look like dark, hunched giants. Julian brought the mail in from the porch, his boots dripping water onto the linoleum, a stack of bills and flyers clutched in his hand. But it was the yellow envelope that caught my eye. It was thick, stamped with a bright red certified mail. Return receipt required notice, and addressed directly to me. Under normal circumstances, Evelyn handled all of our household mail. She was always incredibly fast about it. Almost weirdly fast, snatching the envelopes off the granite counter before I could even get a look at them, filing them away in her private home office that she kept locked under a digital keypad. I had never questioned it before. I had trusted her. I had assumed she was simply protecting her interior design client files. "You want me to just set this on the counter, Uncle Garrick?" Julian asked, holding up the yellow envelope. "No," I said, a cold, strange instinct tightening in my gut like an iron wire. "Open it, Julian. My hands are still a bit shaky from the painkillers. Just read it to me." Julian tore the paper edge, pulled out a thick stack of folded documents, and began to read. I watched his face change as his eyes scanned the first page, his brow furrowed, his jaw dropped, and he looked up at me with an expression of pure, unmitigated shock. "Uncle Garrick," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. This is from Cascade Mortgage Services. It's a foreclosure notice." "What?" I said, a hollow laugh escaping my throat. "That's impossible, Julian. The mortgage is set on automatic payment out of our joint checking account. It's been that way for 12 years. We've never missed a single payment. It says here the loan is 92 days past due," Julian said, his eyes returning to the page, his voice tight. "It says the total outstanding balance is $12,400, and if the payment isn't received in full within 30 days, they are initiating formal foreclosure proceedings on this house." The kitchen went completely, utterly silent. The only sound was the low, steady hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beating of my own heart against my ribs. I built this house. I had spent 15 years paying off the principal, taking on extra weekend bridge inspections, sacrifice after sacrifice, so that we would own our shelter outright, and someone had quietly, deliberately been letting it slip through our fingers while I was standing on bridge decks over the Tacoma Narrows. "Julian," I said, my voice dropping into a low, dead register, "get me my laptop." It took Julian practically lifting me by my shoulders to get me down the short hallway to my study. my surgical incision burning with a sharp pulling heat as I sat in the leather desk chair. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I tried to log into our joint checking account at Washington Federal. Password incorrect. I tried to log into our Cascade mortgage portal. Password incorrect. I tried our home equity loan portal. Password incorrect. Every single financial account we owned had been locked. The passwords changed, the security questions altered. They've all been changed, I murmured, staring at the red access denied text glowing on the screen. Every single one of them. How is that even possible? Julian asked, leaning over my shoulder, his face pale. I don't know, I said, my jaw tightening until my teeth ached, but I'm about to find out. I spent the next 45 minutes on the phone with Washington Federal Customer Service, sitting through 30 minutes of looped acoustic guitar hold music that sounded like a mockery of my own panic. After verifying my identity with my social security number, my mother's maiden name, and a series of security questions about my first truck, the representative finally reset my password. What I found when I logged back into our joint ledger made my stomach drop into a cold, black abyss. Paperless statements had been enabled 6 months ago. The primary email address on the account had been changed from mine to a strange, generic address, emdesignllc@outlook.com. And then I saw the loans. There were 2 personal high-interest signature loans, totaling $40,000, taken out through an online lender called Blue Cap Finance. Both loans had been co-signed with my name. But I had never seen these documents in my life. I had never authorized a single cent of this debt. I looked at the digital timestamps on the loan signatures. The first loan, for $25,000, had been finalized on the exact Tuesday afternoon I was lying in the operating room at Seattle Grace, my abdomen split open, my mind completely gone under the fog of general anesthesia. The digital audit trail showed that the signature had been executed via a digital DocuSign platform, and the IP address listed for the signature matched our home Wi-Fi network. Evelyn had used her laptop, sitting in our redwood living room while I was under the surgeon's knife, to forge my signature on $40,000 of debt. It was sloppy, desperate, and legally brain-dead. Julian, I said, my voice sounding incredibly far away, like I was speaking from the bottom of a deep, dark well. Look up Evelyn's design business Instagram page, the one for her LLC. Julian typed quickly on his phone, then turned the screen toward me. We scrolled through months of posts. There was a brand new leased Range Rover Sport that she had called her client consultation vehicle. There was a closet's worth of designer Chanel handbags, silk scarves, and a massive, custom-built exhibition booth at the Bellevue Luxury Home Show that probably cost more than a year of Chloe's university tuition. None of it made money. The business was a black hole of vanity, spending thousands of dollars to create the illusion of success while our mortgage went unpaid. And then, the final piece of the puzzle locked into place. I looked at the bank ledger for her design LLC, which I was able to access through our joint routing history. The $40,000 forged loan had hit her business account on Thursday morning, and within 48 hours, she had transferred $15,000 of that money directly to Sloan and Harper's personal accounts. She didn't just buy clothes, Julian. I had paid $7,000 for the St. Barts villa and our economy flights, but the $5,000 a day chartered yacht they were lounging on, the private spa treatments at the Eden Rock Resort, the VIP beach club dinners. She had used the forged mortgage loan to fund a luxury lifestyle she couldn't afford, and she had literally paid her wealthy friends to go on vacation with her so she wouldn't have to sit on the beach alone. She had stolen our house to buy the approval of Sloan and Harper. Uncle Garrick, Julian said, his hand resting on my shoulder, his fingers pressing tight. You need a lawyer, like tonight. I didn't call our corporate preservation firm's lawyer. He handled land rights and concrete contracts. Instead, I called an old buddy from my college rowing days, a man named Killian Marsh. Killian was a family law attorney in Seattle, a sharp, iron-willed man who spent his days dismantling the assets of unfaithful spouses and greedy partners. He was the kind of lawyer who looked like a friendly high school coach but had a mind like a steel trap. I sat at my desk in the quiet study, the rain beating a steady, relentless tattoo against the window, And I read Killian every single document, every date, every IP address, and every forged signature. Garrick, Killian said, his voice calm, steady, and entirely unbothered by the gravity of what I had just told him. I'm going to give you the raw truth. If we report this forgery to the bank and to the Redmond Police Department, your wife is looking at federal bank fraud and identity theft charges. This isn't a slap on the wrist. She will go to a federal penitentiary. And if I don't report it, I asked, my hand gripping the phone so tight my knuckles went white. Then that $40,000 of debt is legally yours, Garrick, Killian said. Your name is on the contract, and unless we prove forgery through a criminal filing, the lenders will come after your wages, your retirement, and this house. But if we file for an emergency financial injunction first, before we file the criminal report, we can freeze every single asset associated with both your names. She won't be able to spend another dime. Do it, I said, my voice flat and final. Freeze everything, Killian Garrick. This gives you the kind of leverage most people in a divorce never get, Killian said. It is a nuclear option. It ends the negotiation before it even starts. I don't want a negotiation, Killian, I said, looking out the window at the dark backyard, where the cedar greenhouse stood silent and cold in the rain. I want a demolition. I hung up the phone. For 24 years I had built a home brick by brick, joist by joist, thinking I was creating a sanctuary for the people I loved. But as I sat there in the quiet study, the painkillers finally wearing off, leaving me with a clean, cold anger that felt far sharper than any physical pain, I realized the truth. Evelyn had forged my signature on a piece of paper, but somewhere along the way, she had forged our entire marriage too. She had made it look like a home, but it was just a stage set she had rented, and the lease had finally run out. There is a very specific kind of quiet that settles over a house right before it becomes a courtroom. It is a sterile, hollow quiet, a quiet where the air feels thin, and the only sound is the rhythmic, mechanical ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. On Thursday evening, exactly 7 days after my appendix had ruptured, I sat at our granite kitchen island with my laptop open. Beside me sat Julian, who had just returned from a taco stand down the street, carrying 2 foil-wrapped carnitas tacos. We had silently agreed that the broth and cracker season of our lives was officially over. Evelyn's credit cards, both the platinum joint card she used for her daily designer curator expenses and the business credit card backed by the forged Blue Cap loan, were listed on my screen. My thumb hovered over the digital toggle on the Washington Federal app. This was my last chance to be the bigger man, my last chance to keep the peace, to swallow my pride, to let them finish their St. Barts champagne and figure it out when they returned to Redmond on Monday. I looked at Julian. I looked at the flour-dusted hands of the 23-year-old kid who had spent his only week off spoon-feeding his uncle broth, while his own mother was begging him to go to his kitchen manager job interview. I switched both cards off. The first text message arrived at exactly 8:32. My phone vibrated against the granite counter, the screen lighting up with Evelyn's name. Garrick, are you awake? Strange bank error. My platinum card just got declined at dinner. Can you log in and check what's going on? It's incredibly embarrassing. I didn't reply. I picked up a taco, took a bite, and watched the rain run down the window. 10 minutes later, my phone began to ring. I let it buzz 3 times before I slid the green bar across the screen and held the receiver to my ear. Immediately, the background noise of a high-end Caribbean restaurant washed through the line. The clinking of heavy crystal, the distant, muffled laughter of a wealthy crowd, and the low hum of a jazz trio playing somewhere near the bar. Garrick? Evelyn's voice was whispered, urgent, and vibrating with a sharp, controlled panic. She was clearly stepping away from the table, trying to sound calm in front of her friends while her world was cracking at the seams. Garrick, did you see my text? Both of my cards just got declined. The joint platinum and my business card. Sloan and Harper are sitting right there. This is completely mortifying. Turn them back on immediately. I kept my voice level, calmer than I had felt in 20 years of marriage. I didn't turn them off because of a bank error, Evelyn. I turned them off because they are my cards, my name, my credit. What are you talking about? She hissed, her voice dropping into a low, vicious register. I could picture her standing in the tiled bathroom of the Gustavia restaurant, her knuckles white around her phone. "We are at dinner, Garrick. There are 6 of us at this table. Are you trying to humiliate me?" "I'm not trying to humiliate you, Jess," I said, using her old familiar nickname for the last time. "I turned them off because I found the Blue Cap signature documents. I found the IP address from Tuesday afternoon when I was in surgery. I found the Cascade foreclosure notice." There was a sudden, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. The restaurant noise seemed to vanish entirely, replaced by the sound of her rapid, shallow breathing. "Garrick," she whispered, her voice suddenly cracking, the socialite veneer stripping away to reveal something small and terrified. "I'm sure Sloane and Harper can cover the bill, Evelyn," I said quietly. "Since they took the master suite, it seems only fair. Don't rush back on my account." I hung up the phone. Julian looked up from his taco, his eyebrows raised, chewing slowly. "Damn, Uncle Garrick." "Yeah," I said, setting the phone down face down. "Damn." The next morning, Killian Marsh was as good as his word. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a King County judge had signed an emergency financial injunction, completely freezing every single bank account, checking ledger, and line of credit associated with both of our names. Every joint asset was locked. Every card was dead. Whatever cash Evelyn had in her designer purse in St. Barts was the absolute last liquid money she had access to on that island. Then, I did the part of the plan that I had been turning over in my head since the yellow certified letter first landed on my counter. I opened a new email on my laptop and drafted a message to 2 very specific email addresses. I had pulled them off the Paradise Valley Home Show registry. Cross-referencing them against Sloane's husband's corporate LinkedIn profile and Harper's husband's medical practice website, the subject line read, "Regarding recent financial activity involving your household accounts." I attached 3 things to that email. First, my official hospital discharge papers from Seattle Grace, showing that I had been undergoing emergency abdominal surgery on the exact afternoon the $40,000 loans were finalized. Second, a clean, unedited ledger of Evelyn's Design LLC, showing the exact timestamps of the Blue Cap loan disbursement and the immediate $15,000 transfers to Sloane and Harper's personal accounts. Third, a screenshot of Evelyn's self-care is non-negotiable Instagram post, timestamped the exact same morning I had been trying to crawl to the kitchen for water. I didn't write a long, angry letter. I didn't call anyone names. I didn't need to. In my line of work, we don't throw punches when the mathematics can do the demolition for us. I hit send at exactly 3:47 p.m. "Come on, Julian," I said, standing up from my desk, my side still tender but my heart feeling lighter than it had in 10 years. "Let's go look at that truck." We drove down to a commercial dealer lot off Bell Road in the drizzling afternoon. There, parked near the back fence under a sputtering halogen light, stood the silver food truck Julian had been dreaming about for 2 straight years. It had some rust around the wheel wells, a broken exterior menu board, and a dent in the back bumper, but inside, the kitchen was pristine. A beautiful stainless steel setup with a wood-fired brick deck oven that Julian had clearly memorized down to the millimeter. He stood next to me in the gravel lot, his hands shoved deep into his hoodie pockets, trying and failing to keep his face completely neutral. "You don't have to do this, Uncle Garrick," he muttered, his voice quiet. I can find another apprentice job at the market. It's fine." "I know I don't have to, Julian," I said, reaching out to pat his shoulder, the cedar smell of the lot filling my lungs. "I want to. You gave up your future to feed your old uncle chicken broth when he couldn't walk. The least I can do is make sure that sacrifice wasn't for nothing." We worked out the legal terms right there in the front seat of my truck, with Killian Marsh on speakerphone. My personal savings that had been kept in a separate, historic account from my grandfather's inheritance, completely untouched by the joint ledger, funded the purchase of the truck outright. It was a clean, legal partnership. I would manage the books, the licensing, and the business side, skills I had honed over 20 years of running commercial bridge budgets, and Julian would own the kitchen, the dough, and the fire. "Mercer's Hearth and Harvest," Julian said, testing the name out loud as he stared at the blank silver side of the truck. Sounds like something worth showing up for, Uncle Garrick. It is, I said, looking at the light catching the stainless steel prep counters. It's the first thing we've built in 11 days that's actually meant to last. They landed at SeaTac Airport the next evening at 6 o'clock. I know this because Chloe's phone location was still actively shared on our family tracker. A tracker Evelyn had insisted we all install 3 years ago for safety, back when safety meant her own absolute control over my schedule. I sat at the kitchen island of our Redmond Craftsman home and waited. Killian Marsh sat beside me, a thick leather folder resting on the granite counter before him, his face calm and unbothered, like a captain who had brought his ship into harbor after a long, predictable voyage. Julian stood near the living room doorway, his knives wrapped neatly in a heavy canvas roll, getting ready for his first early morning baking shift at the new truck. At 7:15, the garage door rumbled up. Then it went down. The front door swung open so hard it banged against the drywall of the entryway. Evelyn marched in first, her face sunburned a deep, furious red across the bridge of her nose, her designer Chanel sunglasses pushed up into her hair, her eyes wide with a frantic, unhinged panic I had never seen on her face in 24 years of marriage. Chloe lagged behind her, clutching her iPhone like a plastic shield, her shoulders hunched. Evelyn didn't even look at Killian. She lunged toward the kitchen island, her hands slamming flat against the granite. "What did you do, Garrick?" she screamed, her voice cracking, her chest heaving under her linen travel shirt. "What the hell did you do to us?" If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it, and be sure you're subscribed. Evelyn stood there, her hands shaking on the granite, looking at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated fury. Sloane's husband called her at the airport screaming. He froze all of their joint accounts. Harper's husband wouldn't even ride in the same Uber with us from SeaTac. They are threatening formal divorce, Garrick. They think we ran some kind of fraudulent real estate scam on them. I sat up straight, completely pain-free, my flannel shirt clean, looking at her with a calm she clearly couldn't comprehend. "I didn't run a scam, Evelyn," I said, my voice quiet and steady. "I simply sent them the truth. I sent their husbands your Design LLC bank statements. I showed them the exact ledger lines where the blue cap loans hit your account, and how you transferred $15,000 to Sloane and Harper to pay for their shares of the Gustavia yacht charter. Their husbands aren't mad at me, Evelyn. They're mad because their wives accepted stolen, forged money to live like royalty in St. Barts while I was lying on a concrete garage floor. Garrick, you are a monster," she shrieked, her fingers clawing at the edge of the counter. "You humiliated me. You destroyed my business. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to my reputation in Bellevue?" Killian Marsh slid the leather folder open, pulling out 2 separate documents and placing them side by side on the granite. "Document A, Mrs. Mercer," Killian said, his voice flat and professional, "is a fully completed criminal report for felony bank fraud and identity theft. It detailed the 2 blue cap signature loans, the DocuSign digital audit trail, and the Wi-Fi IP signature matching your personal laptop from the afternoon of Mr. Mercer's surgery. That report gets filed with the Redmond Police Department the second Garrick decides to file it." Evelyn's face went entirely white under her sunburn, her jaw slack. "Garrick, you wouldn't. We're a family. Document B," Killian continued, ignoring her entirely, "is an uncontested divorce settlement. Under these terms, you waive any and all marital claims to this Craftsman home, you waive alimony, and you assume 100% of the blue cap fraudulent debt as your sole separate liability because it was never Garrick's debt to begin with." I looked at her, my hands folded on the table. "If you sign document B, Evelyn, I absorb the credit hit, I pay off the Cascade mortgage arrears myself, and you walk away broke but free. If you fight me on this, if you make me do this the hard way, I sign document A instead. The King County Sheriff's Department is less than 10 minutes from here. You can leave this house with your monogrammed suitcase, or you can leave it in handcuffs. It is entirely up to you." The only sound in the kitchen was the steady rain hitting the window and the sound of the pen trembling against the paper as Evelyn picked it up. She looked at me, 24 years of manufactured composure, of country club smiles, of self-care as non-negotiable captions, collapsing into something small, terrified, and for the very first time in our marriage, completely honest. She signed. Chloe had been standing frozen near the entryway through all of it, but the second her mother's pen left the paper, she found her voice. "Are you serious right now, Dad?" she cried, her tears finally spilling over her sunburned cheeks. You're destroying our entire family over a stupid vacation. You're so incredibly selfish." "It was never about the vacation, Chloe," I said, standing up slowly, my side completely healed, my heart feeling cold and quiet. She didn't sit, but she stopped talking, her mouth opening in shock. I turned my laptop screen toward her, showing the University of Washington tuition portal. "I am still paying your tuition and your books directly to the university registrars every single semester," I said, my voice steady, "because I respect your education, and I'm not going to let you pay for your mother's crimes or my mistakes. But the apartment lease in Seattle? That's done at the end of this month. Your sorority dues? Done. Your monthly allowance? Done. Your car insurance? Done. If you want a lifestyle beyond your tuition and your books, Chloe, you are going to go get a job like every other 19-year-old student in this city." "Dad, you can't do this," she sobbed, her fingers gripping her phone. "How am I supposed to live?" "You'll figure it out, Chloe," I said, using the exact words her mother had left me with. "That's what we do, isn't it? We figure it out." I looked at her for a long, quiet moment, seeing the girl who used to sit on the workbench in my garage when she was 7 years old, handing me nails from a coffee can and calling me her hero. I looked for her, but she was completely gone, replaced by a stranger who made content out of her father's survival. "I don't know who you are now, Liv," I said, using her childhood nickname one last time, my voice shaking just a fraction. "But I hope someday you remember who you used to be. Because that little girl was worth a lot more than the one who turned her father's surgery into a joke for 41,000 views." Chloe didn't scream. She didn't storm out. She just stood there, her shoulders shaking, tears running down her face, realizing in real time that she hadn't just lost her allowance. She had lost her father. The fallout moved incredibly fast after that. Sloan and Harper cut Evelyn off completely, desperately trying to paint themselves as innocent victims to save their own marriages from their husband's wrath. The elite Bellevue interior design circle she had spent 20 years trying to claw her way into dissolved within a month. 6 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Evelyn is currently renting a tiny, drafty one-bedroom apartment near Tacoma, working the retail floor at a department store, folding cashmere sweaters for wealthy clients who have absolutely no idea she used to host spa days in St. Barts on stolen money. Chloe, with her tuition paid but her allowance gone, had to take a job working night shifts at a coffee shop near campus, finally learning exactly how many hours of hard labor go into earning a single dollar. As for me, I sold the Craftsman home in Redmond. There were simply too many memories of a backyard cedar greenhouse built for a girl who never once said thank you. I used my untouched personal savings to purchase that silver food truck for Julian. Today, Mercer's Hearth and Harvest is painted in beautiful, clean white letters across the side of that truck, parked most mornings near Pike Place Market. Julian runs the wood-fired brick oven like he was born to do it, his face red from the heat of the fire, laughing and shouting orders to a line of regular clients that stretches all the way down the block. I sit at the sliding window, managing the register, running the books, and using my 20 years of project management experience to build a business that is actually ours. I watch him work, smelling the rich, warm scent of sourdough and cedar wood smoke rising into the cool Seattle air, and I think about the concrete garage floor, the crackers on the nightstand, and the pen shaking in Evelyn's hand. For 24 years, I believed I was building a home. It turns out I was just building a prison, and the prison wasn't the cedar walls of the house. It was the people I had put inside them. Now I am finally free, and I have never been happier. The fire in the hearth always outlasts the winter storm, as long as you keep the right wood burning. If you felt the warmth of Julian's and Garrick's loyalty today, go ahead and hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from tonight. Take care of your loved ones, and I'll catch you on the next one.